Hello, my name is Han. Today I'm excited to present Textlet. This work is being done with my collaborator Miguel, who is also going to co-present this with his live demo, as well as Wendy, Mackay, and Michel Beaudouin-Lafon. So this is screenshots I took from a video where Larry Tesler was demonstrating the initial search and replace and copy paste in the system SIGCHI. While Larry's work has always tried to get rid of mode in text editing, text editing software has been used for thousands of millions of users today to create all sorts of documents. We are particularly interested in those highly structured and complex documents like legal contract, patent, and technical manuals. Because the complexity of these documents comes from the constraints that's imposed to those documents, as well as the consistency requirements author needs to follow while editing those documents. We are interested to find out how do professional users manage constraints and consistency, which talked before, while editing those technical documents. We conducted 12 interviews with legal professionals. So we went to their offices, we asked them to show us the most recent document they've been working on and tell us a story about it. We generate 6 themes using semantic analysis approach. The first one, maintain term consistency. So in the example of lawyers with a legal contract, they define the terms at the beginning of the contract, and they are required to follow that term across the whole document. If any change is about to make this term, for example, if the client makes some new request, they also need to make sure the changes are made consistently. There's also a lot of dependencies within the document, for example, the numbering system, the references, and they manage them by hand. They also need to visit different locations of the document, jump back and forth. They reuse the content, they reuse the text, structure, or style, so different level of reuse of the document. They also need to manage the annotations back and forth with the co-authors because their work is highly collaborative. And in this talk, we're going to focus on 4 of these issues. To address these issues, we have been focused on this basic mechanism of text editing, which is a selection. That users select the text, they apply the command to affect the content of that selection through the toolbar or context menu. But text selection is transient. As soon as you select the next selection, the previous selection is gone. You have to reselect it in order to do something with it. Now let's see an example of how basic textlets can address this issue.
A basic textlet allows me to store the contents of a selection to capture, for example, the changes that I make inside of it, and at a later time, reselect or recreate the selection that I stored.
So to recap, on the left side, we have the traditional text editing area. And on the right top, we have a list of behaviors we can assign to different textlet. And down there, we have the list of textlet. And each textlet is bound to a text selection in the main area and it's synchronized with it. Now I'm going to show you how 4 specialized textlet behavior can address some of the issues we identified before. Strict length limit. So patent offices limit the number of words in the abstract and number of characters in the patent title. And the traditional software, if you want to count a word, you need to select the text, invoke the dialog box, as we can see here. As soon as you start to edit the text, selection is gone. So if you want to count it again, you need to reselect it again and re-invoke the dialog box. So you can see it's a very tedious process. So we designed Textlet to address this issue. Let's see a live demo.
Here I have the abstract for a patent submission that I want to keep under 150 words. So I'm gonna select the text and create a countlet for that. I'm just going to attach a count of the words right next to the selection. In this case, I need to adjust the selection to contain the entire abstract. And now we'll show 184 words. I can set up the limit in this case 150, so that whenever I am over it, I see the counter with red color, and when I'm under it, I see it green. If I keep typing words, I will see the counter update.
The second issue is that need to explore multiple alternatives. We see that professional technical writers often need to manage multiple alternatives for part of the document before deciding or agree on which one to keep. And then participant complained that the track changes features introduce more problems than it solves and make it difficult to understand the modification. So the track changes tracks all the edits of the document, not the intermediate version that user may want to keep. And we designed Varilet to address that issue.
Here I want to try different variations of the title, but I don't want to lose the original value that I have there. So I'm going to create a variantlet, which will store the text that I selected and track the changes that I make, so that whenever I use the switch button, I can go back and forth between the latest version and the stored one.
Another thing we find is that participants avoid using automatic numbering. As P7 said, if I have automatic numbering set up, this would have become paragraph 2, and all the numbering of the claim would have changed. I would not be very happy. So we summarize as several reasons. First, participants are not able to differentiate automatic numbering from normal numbering until they select the text. I see the example here, we have two lists, but I don't know which one is automatic, which one is not. Until I select them, I can see the visual feedback. The second reason is that the manual update is always required to keep the consistency, to keep the references up to date. If you forgot to update, you might end up having 3-figure 1. And lastly, the dependencies are invisible after an update, so user cannot be sure if changes are correct or not. Let's see how Numberlet can address this issue.
In this pattern, I have figures that I want to number sequentially, so I can use numberlets for that. I start by typing the name of the figure, just figure, followed by the number symbol, to create the numberlet. Using the plus button on the numberlet, I insert the name of the first figure, which is figure 1, which is going to create an associated textlet here that I can use to insert references inside a document using the add reference button. And for the following figures, I only have to use the numberlet that I created to keep inserting sequential numbers, in this case figure 2. That will also create an associated textlet on sidebar that I can use to insert references to it. If I delete figure 1 here, that will renumber the rest of the figures. In this case, figure 2 now is figure 1, and so the references are correct as well. And the broken references of the old figure 1 will show up in the document with question marks. I can delete that one from the sidebar as well.
Finally, we find that participants rely on memory to maintain their consistency. They don't use replace all. They say it's too risky. I would not let a computer do it for me. I prefer doing manually. For example, here I want to replace position with state. So I see the occurrences on the left panel, and I want to replace the first one. But as soon as replace the first one, I don't know, I want to check the first one, but I cannot do that because it's gone until I hit the redo command so I can see what is here, what has been replaced. But also on the left panel as here, the search command, it's not active anymore since I hit the redo button. Summarize this as sequential interaction. As P7 said, the problem is that we cannot check. It made a replacement and it goes to the next occurrence, so I don't see what just happened. Another thing we find that participant needs to access a context. As P4 said, we have to conjugate a verb with a subject. It's like a lot of work. So P4 is working on a French document, and while in French language, if you change a noun with different gender, you also need to change a verb, an article, and so on. In the previous example we showed on the left side, even though you show the context, but the context is not interactive and extendable. Now let's see how Searchlet can address this issue.
In this example, I want to find occurrences of the word position and replace them for the word state. I will start by selecting an occurrence to create the textlet, and then turn on the search behavior, which will highlight the occurrences on the document. Since I don't want to work directly on the document, I will turn on the inspect behavior, which is going to list the occurrences with their surroundings on the sidebar. From here, I can spot one in particular, expand its surroundings, and decide that I want to ignore it in a global replace action using the ignore button. This will leave it out of the global replace action that I will perform now. I will type the word state and confirm the replace. I will see the change reflected on the document and on the sidebar. I can use the occurrences to navigate through the document. If for one in particular I would rather have it read position, I can use the undo button and undo that particular change, leaving the others untouched. After I'm done, I can turn off the inspect behavior and continue working on the document. If I ever type the word position again, it will get highlighted because the search behavior is still on. This can be used as a reminder to write state instead.
So with all these behaviors of Textlets, we're interested in how do technical writers can use Textlets, and more importantly, how do they appropriate this concept. So we conduct an observational study with 8 users. We find that unlike previously, they don't use replace all, now they replace all and then correct. As P1 said, I can see immediately what variations are in the text from the side panel. I can see it will work by replacing all the matches. Then also, the persistent selection helps users to check their previous action. As P3 said, I have this list of all the occurrences. When I want to do some replacement, I choose some of them. I keep the whole list that I can always check in the side panel. This is quite important. I do not need to proofread a whole text. Another participant suggests that we can embed the text searchlets into the document itself, for example, to highlight the forbidden word, and as the document circulate between different co-authors, and the co-authors were aware of those constraints. So the future work involves develop more advanced prototypes that can be tested in a longitudinal study. We are also interested in design new texts for commenting, formatting, and computing text. So in this talk, I showed you 4 issues we identified in the interview studies and how different specialized texts can address them. The takeaway message of this talk is that all these behaviors are based on a very simple but powerful concept of texts that you refine text selection into an interactive object that user can manipulate. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention.